Two people can sit through the exact same event and walk away holding two completely different versions of what happened. A couple leaves the same dinner, same table, same conversation, and one of them thinks it went fine, and the other spends the drive home convinced something's wrong. Not because one of them is lying, not because one of them is stupid, because your brain was never actually built to show you reality. It builds an interpretation of reality in real time, and then hands you the interpretation as if it were the raw thing itself. Here's what should actually stop you for a second. There's a specific rare ability that lets a person catch their own brain doing this in the moment while it's happening, instead of realizing it 3 days later during an argument that never needed to happen. It's called metacognition. Most people assume intelligence means knowing more, learning faster, solving harder problems. But there's a different, quieter kind of intelligence that outperforms all of that. And it has nothing to do with how much you know. It's the ability to watch your own thinking while it's happening, instead of simply living inside it. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what that means, why almost nobody develops it without deliberately training for it, and the specific system you can actually use to build it. What metacognition actually is. Strip away the jargon and it's this simple. Thinking is having a thought. Metacognition is noticing that you're having it. That's the entire distinction, and it sounds almost too small to matter until you see what it changes. Someone's phone buzzes with a message from their boss. "Can we talk tomorrow morning?" A thought arrives instantly. "I'm getting fired." Thinking stops there. The rest of the night gets spent rehearsing what to say, spiraling through worst-case budgets, barely sleeping. Metacognition is the version where, right after that thought lands, a second thought shows up behind it. I'm having the thought that I'm getting fired, and I have zero actual evidence for that. Same message, same brain, completely different night, because one version treated the thought as a fact, and the other treated it as a claim that hadn't been checked yet. Or picture someone about to send a text they've rewritten 6 times, convinced the other person is annoyed with them because their last reply was short. Thinking says, "They're upset with me. I did something wrong." Metacognition asks a much smaller, much more useful question. What actually happened here? And what am I adding to it? Maybe the reply was short because they were in a meeting. The event was 3 words on a screen. Everything else, the story about being upset, the guilt, the 6 rewritten texts, was generated afterward by a mind that mistook its own interpretation for information. This is the entire difference in one sentence, and it's worth remembering because everything else in this video is really just this idea applied. Most people don't think about their thoughts. They think from their thoughts. They live inside the interpretation without ever noticing there's a gap between what happened and what their mind decided it meant. Why this gap exists in the first place. The reason this happens to basically everyone, not just people who overthink, comes down to how the brain is actually built. It doesn't wait for information and then calmly process it. It predicts first, it generates a forecast of what's about to happen, and then mostly uses your senses to check that forecast rather than build reality from scratch. Most of the time, the forecast is close enough that you never notice. But the forecast, not the raw event, is what you actually experience. That's why the couple had 2 different dinners. He forecast an ordinary night, and ordinary behavior confirmed it. She forecast distance, and the exact same behavior confirmed that instead. Memory works the same way in reverse. It's not a recording that plays back untouched. Every time you recall something, your brain rebuilds it on the spot, using whatever mood and belief you're carrying right now. Which means the story you tell about last year's argument with a friend has probably already been quietly rewritten 2 or 3 times since it happened, and you'd have no way of knowing. And once a belief is in place, the mind stops checking it and starts defending it. Confirmation bias means you don't go looking for the truth about something you've already decided. You go looking for confirmation. Decide once that a coworker is unreliable, and the 9 times they follow through vanish from memory, while the 1 time they're late gets filed as proof. This is also why confidence and competence often move in opposite directions. Psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger found that the skill needed to do something well is often the same skill needed to notice you're doing it badly. So beginners are frequently the most confident people in the room, simply because they haven't developed the awareness that would show them the gap. Charles Darwin put it plainly, ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. None of that needs to become its own separate essay here. The point isn't the mechanism, it's the conclusion it forces. If your brain predicts instead of records, edits memory on replay, and defends beliefs instead of testing them, then the thought arriving in your head right now was never guaranteed to be accurate. It was generated, which means it can be examined. What that examination actually looks like. This is the part most explanations skip, so here it is directly. In the exact moments where it matters, someone's manager doesn't respond to a proposal for 2 days. Thinking says, my boss hates this, I'm not good enough for this role. Metacognition says, I'm having the thought that my boss hates this. What's the actual evidence? The evidence is a 2-day silence. That's it. Everything else is a story built on top of the silence, and the story is doing a lot more emotional damage than the silence itself ever could. Someone sits down to start a project they've been avoiding, and the thought arrives, fully formed and completely convincing. I'm gonna fail at this. Thinking obeys the thought and closes the laptop. Metacognition asks one question before deciding anything. What evidence do I actually have that I'm going to fail? Versus what evidence do I have that I've simply never started? Usually there isn't evidence of failure. There's only the discomfort of an unfamiliar task, wearing the costume of a prediction. The shift in both cases is small on the page and enormous in practice. Not I am a failure, but my brain generated a failure-shaped thought. Not they're upset with me, but I'm interpreting silence as anger. What else could explain it? The sentence barely changes. The relationship between you and the thought changes completely, because a thought you're merely observing has to earn your belief. A thought you're fused to gets believed automatically the instant it shows up. How to actually build this? Here's the system, and it works in this order every time. 1. Catch the thought. Notice it arrived. Not analyze it yet. Not fight it. Just notice. Something just showed up in my head. 2. Name what's happening. Put a plain word on it. This is fear. This is embarrassment. This is a prediction about tomorrow. UCLA neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman found that simply naming an emotion accurately in the moment lowers activity in the brain's threat centers almost immediately before you've done anything else about it. 3. Separate fact from interpretation. Ask what actually, physically happened versus what you've added to it. A 2-day silence is a fact. They hate my work is an interpretation stacked on top of it. 4. Ask what evidence would change your mind. If you can't answer this, you're not holding a belief, you're holding a feeling that's borrowed the language of certainty. A real belief can name the thing that would disprove it. If nothing could ever change your mind about it, it was never really a conclusion. It was a mood wearing a conclusion's clothes. 5. Make the decision after the examination, not before it. Not instead of deciding it, after. This isn't about becoming passive or endlessly second-guessing every thought you have. Most thoughts are fine and don't need this treatment. This is for the ones that carry real weight, the ones about to shape a relationship, a career move, a decision you can't easily undo. Once those 5 steps are familiar, a few sharper tools become genuinely useful. Self-distancing. Picture the exact situation happening to a close friend instead of you, and ask what you'd tell them. Most people answer that instantly, with far more clarity than they can manage for their own version of the same problem, because fear and ego don't show up nearly as loudly when the problem belongs to someone else. The pre-mortem, borrowed from surgical teams. Before a decision that matters, spend 2 minutes imagining it's already gone badly. and work backward to the most likely reason, which surfaces small, fixable risks that pure optimism walks straight past. Prediction tracking. Before an uncertain outcome, write down what you expect and how confident you are. Then check yourself against what actually happens. Researcher Philip Tetlock found this single habit, done consistently, is what actually separates accurate forecasters from confident ones. And a short nightly review, 3 lines. What did I assume today? What turned out to be true? Where was my thinking distorted? Which tends to surface a pattern within a month that you'd otherwise never notice about yourself? Where this actually pays off. Go back to the couple in the car after dinner. Same situation, same quiet drive home. But this time, one of them catches the thought as it arrives instead of a week later, mid-argument. He's pulling away. And instead of treating that as settled, something else runs first. I'm interpreting his behavior as distance. What else could explain it? Maybe it's work. Maybe it's tiredness. Maybe it's genuinely nothing. The point was never to force a happy answer. The point is that the question got asked at all before the story got to run the rest of the night uncontested. That's the entire skill, and it's rarer than it should be for exactly the reason this video started with. Most people don't think about their thoughts. They think from their thoughts, treating every interpretation as if it arrived stamped with the label fact, never once checking whether it earned that label or simply inherited it from an old fear, a bad night's sleep, or a habit of mind nobody ever taught them to question. You won't catch every thought. Nobody does. But the difference between a life run by unexamined forecasts and a life run by someone who occasionally stops to check the forecast against the weather, that difference compounds quietly for years into something that looks from the outside a great deal like wisdom. It isn't. It's just the rare habit of noticing the thought before believing it.